Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Preference. We're glad you made it. We have some new information coming hot off the presses with regard to big money for the benefit of veterans. Up $4 million, $500,000 increments, big numbers out there to help benefit veterans and spouses. So that's a fantastic way to start the day. So with that, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. We truly appreciate it. Trying to grow the channel for you so we can continue to get the information into the hands of those that need it. All right, with that, I'm going to kind of dive into this. This is an article on Military Times by Leo Shane III. He does a lot, obviously, he's on Military Times, so he does a lot of military veteran stuff. He's usually pretty good and pretty spot on, and trust the stuff that he puts out. So we're going to read through it, kind of digest it a little bit, kick it around, get some thoughts, kind of dig into it, look for nuggets and so forth. So let's jump into it now. The headline is VA to provide grants for veteran, spouse, employment. So it's veteran, comma, spouse. So both veterans and spouses employment help. Veterans Affairs officials on Friday, here at the beginning of May 2024, unveiled a new $4 million grant program designed to help new veterans and their spouses find post-military jobs. And I'm going to stop right there because I have my own thoughts just on that opening paragraph, but I want to kick it over to Chris and just kind of give me your first impression of where we're going with this.
I like the focus. I like that there is, it's going to break down into basically what eight grants of 500,000. If they went smaller, you're really not going to get a whole lot out of it. Like that, the admin costs of just putting something in place. And so what I'm seeing is that they're going to go to places, organizations that already are doing this work and hopefully doing it well. And they're going to juice them with a little bit so they can actually provide more services to more people. And that's always a good thing in my mind. If these are real services being provided to real veterans and real veteran spouses and family members, helping them transition from military into the civilian world for whatever reasons they're not having success, let's juice it and get them where they need to be. And so for all you organizations out there that do this, go ahead and apply for the grant money because there's still a lot of people need help out there. Randy, what are you seeing on your side?
Well, I like the multi-pronged attack. They're not just talking about helping veterans, but they're talking about helping veterans and their spouses find post-military jobs. And that support of the entire family unit, I think, is something that we as a veteran community need. And it's something that the Department of Veteran Affairs hasn't always done as well as it should. So it's good to support the veteran as they transition from active duty or the Guard or the reserves into full-time civilian status. But we also have to remember that the spouse has been serving right alongside that veteran. And so I love the fact that this is a multi-prong or at least two-prong attack. The amount of money in terms of the federal budget isn't significant, $4 million, but in terms of the VA and in terms of new programs, $4 million is quite a bit. So possibly a pilot program. And I love that it's taken a holistic approach to supporting the veteran and the veteran's family. So that's my initial take, and I'll throw it back over to Jason so we can keep going through the article.
Yeah, so yes, I love that it's two-pronged. I wouldn't be opposed. Now, granted, there's a dollar figure deficit here to including dependents, right? So sometimes you'll get a 16, 17, 18-year-old that's still living with you as you're getting ready to transition out of the military, and now you're transitioning and you have your dependent child. Maybe you have a cutoff date of 26 years of age or something like that. I think that would be helpful. The 4 million, I'm not super excited about. I mean, it's better than nothing at the end of the day. But yeah. 4 million, when you're talking about the number of veterans out there. Now, granted, not all veterans are going to be looking for work, but 4 million is really going to be a pebble in the pond. And this would be my suggestion, is once we're able to ascertain where these locations that are going to receive the money, again, if they're breaking it into, and we haven't even gotten there yet in the article, but to Chris's point, If they're breaking it down to $500,000 increments, you're talking about 8 locations. So now in those 8 locations, once we're able to actually figure that out, which we'll have to do another video when that time comes, my suggestion is utilize those services and become success stories, because that's what will make this become 10 million the next go, and have 16 locations, and so on and so forth. It's one of those things, I'm telling you, if we don't utilize it and help these organizations have success stories, it will evaporate and not be there. It'll go to the next, the next mouth, right? Quiet mouths don't get fed. So we need to make sure that we do our part on the receiver's end. All right, let's jump back into this real quick. The program announced on Military Spouse Appreciation Day stems from legislation passed by Congress in 2021, so a couple years ago, 3 years ago, and will offer grants up to $500,000 to organizations that provide employment-based resources and tools for transitioning service members and spouses. Now, I'm fairly familiar with the nonprofit world and organizations that do provide those services. I want to kick it back to you, Randy, and just based on what their direction is, what are your thoughts and what do you envision will be happening from that?
Well, they get into it a little bit further down in the article, but the big thing is placement services, getting through some interview training, getting through some resume writing. A lot of these things aren't familiar to us when we're in the military. We don't necessarily have a civilian resume up to speed. And a lot of transitioning service members forget that that is a critical component to finding work in the civilian world. So I think getting a lot of the little foundational blocks in place is the intent of this legislation, because frankly, our community needs that help. So I'm pleased that they're getting at the root of the problem. Hopefully there's also kind of an expansion down the road to get to some of these other services that veterans need, like getting their online profiles on LinkedIn up to speed. Some of this stuff is done in TAP, but really, is it done in TAP? I don't know.
Right.
You spend a half hour on it. You might spend an hour on it. But frankly, your online, your digital presence, your interview skills, what your resume looks like, who you're networking with, name them all, are all things that the veteran needs to have polished before they leave the military. And frankly, they need to be interviewing before they leave the military to really make it a seamless transition. So that's my take. Chris, I'll kick it over to you to get your 2 cents.
Yeah, and shout out to First Lady Jill Biden, who not only in this administration, but in previous administration, in partnership with Michelle Obama, they have done a lot for military transitions and have always kept the spouses in mind, because the spouses, not even at the time of PCS, but even every single move and every single the challenge of finding gainful employment with the ability of leveraging the things that they know and can contribute is always difficult. And so this was part of the 4+1 campaign, and hopefully there's more behind this. And one of the questions that I have is, when I was in, I didn't have a significant other. I didn't have kids. I didn't have anything that a lot of the folks have to worry about. My goal of going through TAP was to get PCS. So I did whatever I had to do to get the hell out. And I didn't personally take full advantage of it. And, I understand why that happens, because time and place matters. We've spoken about, some of these things and how important they are. And we've had previous videos that you can go back and watch on looking at building LinkedIn profiles, or things to consider in resumes, how to be seen. But repetition of the prayer doesn't hurt the prayer, right? And these things will matter. Unfortunately, it often happens at a time where people need something. So the more that they can prepare, and from what I'm taking from this article is that we're trying to help people prepare before, so it isn't as big of a life crisis of when the transition actually happens, or when you find yourself unemployed, whether it's the veteran transition and veteran member or the spouse. And so again, anything more that we could do to continue to beat this drum and get people thinking about careers in a different way, whether they know to access things on base if they have access to it, or through TAP if spouses have access to things through TAP, or the local workforce boards that help with all of these same skills. It is making sure that they understand where these benefits exist, what benefits they could garner, and how do they access them. Those are the things that we should just continue to, and that's why we're talking about this today.
Absolutely. Now, I think that, when it comes to the way that the VA structures these types of things, these grants, they're 99.9% of the time targeting nonprofits that are already in existence and administering some sort of employment program. Now, what I've seen, and look, I get it, it's geographic, it's not probably this way everywhere, but a lion's share, what I've seen is typically the veteran serving nonprofit tip of the spear is homeless services.
Yeah.
Then they have these kind of wraparound services, and they'll reach out for these additional grants to provide maybe employment services. So I throw that out there because you might not be homeless, but you might need help finding your next job. So make sure that you don't short side yourself by going, oh, that's a homeless, I'm not going to talk to them. Reach out to that local organization that it may serve as a nonprofit for homeless veterans and ask them if they have an employment program, because they might be getting this money. When I ran a nonprofit for homeless veterans, I had the bulk of the money was VA grants for homeless services. However, I had a grant from a local grocery store chain that gave us a grant to help with employment stuff for veterans. So I had a part-time, half-time worker who administered that program. So it's going to be kind of the same thing. They're focused on organizations that already have this stuff in place. The VA can't do it. I mean, they'd have to hire a bunch of new people and all that stuff. It doesn't make sense. So sometimes people think, well, why doesn't the VA just do this? They're going to leverage resources that are out there and not have to pay them as employees. And in the end, it's probably cheaper for the VA to get this to the boots on the ground aspect. The services, one of the things that I've noticed so far, and I believe to be true, is this program is not going to be inhibited by household income or age. So you if you need to help finding a job and you're 63, well, then here you go. If your spouse is making $150,000 a year, but you need to go find a job too, well, here you go. So right. I think that there's going to be a lot of options here for folks. Some of the services that they're going to include, right, are resume writing assistance, interview training, employment placement services, and related help. The one thing out of all of that I would really lean on is employment placement services. This means they've created relationships with local organizations, typically within their geographic area, right? Within a commutable distance, probably within a 15-minute drive anywhere around their location is usually where their real power is. And you never know who they may have partnered with, and they might have partnered with a great organization that you want to get in with. So don't be shy. Ask what employers do you guys have partnerships with, because you might be able to leverage that. Anything else that you guys wanted to chime in on this aspect?
I think, directing these programs and these resources further to the left in the veterans timeline or the transitioning service members timeline is really important. I talk to a lot of veterans. All three of us work with veterans. And one of the common themes that we hear is, I wish I would have done X, Y, or Z sooner. You could throw BDD out there. I wish I would have got my VA claim done while I was still on and had those benefits ready for me right when I walked out the door for the last time. And on day one as a veteran, I wish I had it. for a lot of transitioning service members and their spouses, the first touch point that they have with the VA, although it is a DOL program, is TAP. And I feel like it's not enough and it's too late in the service member's timeline. Just because a service member is still on active duty, once they put in that request to, be honorably discharged or to retire, that's the time to start working with that individual. A lot of times those orders take 3, 6, 10, 12 months to really fully process before they hit the street as a civilian. And they need to be working with some of these programs and through some of these processes to make sure that it's as smooth a transition as possible. So that's kind of what I was thinking on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and my final thought on this was something that you said, just doubling down on the employment placement services, and take advantage of that while you're still in. A lot of jobs now can be done online, a lot of jobs and remote, and there's nothing that says you have to wait for now there might be some rules of eligibility but whether it's this program or other programs, the best time to seek employment is when you're already employed, and even doing that before you PCS, that's something that you could do.
Absolutely. All right. So there's a couple quotations here, and then I'm going to kind of go through this. So the first one here goes, these grants will help our nation's service members and their spouses get the tools and assistance they need to get the jobs they deserve. VA Undersecretary for Benefits Joshua Jacobs said in a statement, our goal is to put service members and their families into positions where their transition out of the military isn't only manageable, it's successful, and empowers them to continue to lead our country. Strong statements. I like it. Let's move on. Department officials did not say how many veterans and family members they expect to be helped by the new program. About 200,000 service members leave the military annually. So let's digest that for a minute, guys. 200,000 service members leave the military annually, and we're talking about a $4 million grant, right? So of that 200,000, you could probably estimate at least 25% of them have a spouse, I would think. So We're talking about a big number here. What are your guys' thoughts on the statements from the VA Undersecretary for Benefits and the fact that they know how many people are leaving, and here's the grant, 4 million. I mean, look, we see comments all the time in YouTube about where the government's spending money, right? And we get $4 million to help veterans and spouses. There's a little deficit there compared to some things. So just want to throw that your guys' way. Chris, you go first.
Yeah, look, I mean, the fact that they're calling this out means that there's a gap. The fact that they've acknowledged that there's a gap and they've put something behind it, even though it should and could be a lot more, it's still promising in light of all the things where the government could be spending money on today. So I hope it is more like a seed to something greater. And so my call out is to whoever gets these grants, do great work with it, and maybe more will come.
Yeah. We've kind of already said it, and Jason said it well earlier in this video, but if you don't use it, you lose it. So we do need to, as a veteran community, make sure that we're using this tool and making sure the money is spent to serve our needs. I don't have as much heartburn with the top line number here, maybe as some of the viewers do. $4 million for 200,000 people really is nothing, and it's only going to serve a tiny fraction of that 200,000 each year. I see it more as a pilot program, and I don't have a problem with those as long as somebody is really on top of the data, really on top of the, we'll call it after action reports, best practices, figuring out what is and is not working with the program. And then as the program goes, they're vectoring money through successful channels. I don't have a problem with that as long as we see, upward pressure on the top line dollars spent, and it's meeting the needs of the community in short order through practices that work. I don't really have a problem with that. Sometimes it's better to go small and figure it out than throw a whole bunch of money at a program and end up with a mess. So right. I can understand it.
Yeah. And I go back to what I said earlier, which is, look, if we identify that one of these grant recipients are in your neck of the woods and you're looking for work, why not just go there, see if you can, pick out a nugget or two going through their program, see if you can leverage one of their relationships and become a success story for them, even if they did 5% for you in that process, right? Because what I hate to see is lackluster results when good things are happening and at no fault of the organization or the veterans who participate. It's just the word doesn't get out, and you're working with four people who, I mean, let's face it, guys, not everybody has an easy time getting a job. There's some people out there that have very, very, very high barriers to employment, right? And I feel bad for them, but I mean, you have to interview, you have to get hired, and some people have a very hard time crossing that threshold. So we need some people to be able to actually become success stories in this stuff. So anyway, I'm going to stop beating that dead horse.
When you do, please comment, please post, please let us know how things are going. We could take your lessons of success and share them with others, because ultimately that's what we're here for.
Yeah, good point. And look, if anybody finds out where the grant recipients are before us, I mean, look, we're all human and everybody's looking for things and searching things on the internet. Throw those in the comments too. Let people know where this stuff's happening. All right, so I'm going to run through the rest of this, and then we'll do one last kind of round robin with it. So separating troops, not separating the troops and their spouses, but spouses and their loved ones who are exiting the military. Sounds weird to me, separating troops. So exiting the military. Separating troops and their spouses already have access to Military One Source services, which we did killer video on that not too long ago. Check it out. Through the Department of Defense for 1 year after they leave the service. The Department of Labor also hosts Transition Employment Assistance, which is TAP, for military spouses and caregiver workshops designed to help those individuals find new jobs. Despite that, military and veteran spouse unemployment rates sit at more than 20%, despite years of federal focus on the problem. Lawmakers are considering several new initiatives aimed at the group in the annual defense authorization bill being drafted by congressional committees. Veteran employment rates have generally remained at or below national estimates, although younger veterans have struggled more than their older counterparts to find work in their first years out of service. VA officials said details on how organizations can apply for the grant will be released in June. We will be keeping an eye on that. And by the way, I have an email list nationally for all of the nonprofits that receive the supportive services for veterans families, which is the homeless veteran organization. So we'll shoot that information over to them so they'll all be aware as well. So with that, let's kick it over to you, Randy, and give us any final thoughts on where we're going with this.
Yeah, they throw that number 20% out there for military and veteran spouse unemployment. I honestly think it's probably higher than that, but there might be rational reasons. Some of it is just all the PCSing that they experience and the continual breaks in their career ladder as they're supporting their loved one. A lot of this pool is our ladies that have kids, and some of them choose to stay home, so that might be part of it. But whatever the reason, the number is way too high. And I think we can wrap this up with, kind of our thesis on the veterans too, is that we need to get to them sooner in the transition process. So if the service member raises his hand and says, it's time for me to retire, it's time for me to separate, whatever, in order to start getting cut in that whole process that unfolds over 6 or 12 months, whatever that may look like, that's the time for these programs to be reaching out to the spouse too. It's not hard through DEERS for the military to figure out if a transitioning service member has a spouse. That is a very easy thing. That data is at these programs' fingertips. So kind of a two-part deal there. Good on them for getting to TAP and working through Military One Source and some of these other programs, but let's make this a really deliberate outreach to these spouse groups. Do you need help transitioning? What do your employment goals look like? Do you want to, gain employment once your spouse transitions? Sometimes the answer is no. It's, I want to stay home with the kids or whatever it may be. But a lot of times the answer is, yeah, I need some help. And I've been at 6 or 8 different bases over the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. And I don't have a good track record built up at one employer or in one community. So 9 months out, 12 months out, that is the time to be working with these spouses. So hopefully those over at the VA that are watching this video take that little nugget of advice to heart. That's what I got. I'll throw it over to Chris.
Yeah, and I know that I said my last piece was my last piece, but if those of you who have seen multiple videos, that's never the case. Because what happens is somebody like Randy says something brilliant, and it gets my mind cranking. And one of the things that he said, he didn't call it underemployment, but yes, if it's 20% unemployed in this sector, it's probably 50% underemployed, right? And so getting ahead of that early on is so very important, because we want to see everybody transition well. And Lady Biden, when you see this, please feel free to join us. We could have you on one of the sessions, and we'll talk more about this and continuously.
All right, outstanding. So that's going to wrap this one up. We really appreciate you guys for watching. We'll keep an eye open for that grant information coming out in June, and we will share it with you here. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.